Oh hey guys, me and Greg were just sitting here in peaceful bliss knowing that we, the council, have decided that this game right here is the best game of all time. Also, I think Greg is high.
What's that?
Now this game, Tears of the Kingdom, is called the best game by us for good reason. Now there are so many good and amazing things about this game. However, no game is perfect and there is some bad. But I will first start with the good, then talk about the bad, and then talk about the absolutely amazing. Tears of the Kingdom has tried to improve upon every aspect of Breath of the Wild. Every little thing that you like about Breath of the Wild has been improved one way or another and made better in this game. Stables now have a rewards program that give you useful and cool stuff for your horse, and the horse god can do more than just revive horses, but upgrade them too. The dye shop lets you not only dye your clothes, but also change the look of your paraglider. Even just getting monster parts, now you can use them for more than just making elixirs and selling them, but you can also fuse them to weapons. A lot of big and small things were just made better in this game.
Dungeons?
Dungeons have improved drastically from the previous game. In the previous game, all the dungeons looked the same and had similar bosses that weren't particularly unique or hard. And while the bosses in this game aren't really that hard either, except for Queen Gibdo, who summons an army of fast-crawling Gibdos and flying Gibdos. But anyway, the bosses are way more unique and fit with the dungeon much more than the dungeon bosses in the previous game. The dungeons themselves have improved with unique themes and better puzzles. You now have a partner going into each dungeon that you use to help you complete and solve the puzzles, and makes the dungeons much more fun. There are more regular enemies in the dungeons too, which was a problem in the previous game. Overall, the dungeons are way better than they were before in the previous game, in almost every way. Now, the story of this game is told in different ways. Now, just like in the previous game, you have memories that you get by going to certain locations in the game, except they're not Link's memories this time. They're Zelda's memories, and basically tells the story of what happened to Zelda when she went back in time, and tells the story of what made Ganondorf into the Demon King. The memories tell a much more interesting tale of something so unknown, and contrast to the memories in Breath of the Wild that gave more detail about the fall of Hyrule, something we already really knew about. You also learn about the story in the present as you progress through the game and find out more about what happened to Zelda and what all these Zelda sightings really mean. And you of course learn about the Demon King's recovery and preparation for a fight with Link. The story is told better and is much more interesting than the story in Breath of the Wild. Now it's time to talk about the few bad things.
Dungeons?
So, I put dungeons in the good part of the video, but there is still some problems with the dungeons in this game. Number one is that it's still the same exact premise as the dungeons in the last game, which is activate 5 things to unlock the boss fight, although in this game it's sometimes 4. Wow, I'm so intrigued by this huge change! Number 2 is that they're not very restrictive. Now, some people say that's a good thing, that the developers want you to cheat, and while that is true, giving you many different ways to complete shrines using all the different abilities without the need to do it the intended way, it's not really the same with dungeons. The dungeons are the big puzzle-solving marathons with a bunch of enemies along the way and a boss fight. They are set up in a way to restrict you from cheesing it. You can purposely or accidentally skip a whole part in a dungeon, which I don't feel is a good thing. I think allowing multiple ways to get through a dungeon is great. I just think they should restrict some things so that it forces you to actually try and figure out a good way to solve a puzzle and move on. Now, if there are people saying, well, what if it's too hard to figure out? Why can't you just do it if you want, but why not allow me to get past without an issue so I don't get stuck? My brother in Christ, just use a YouTube guide. Now, some may disagree that dungeons should be restrictive, and that's fine because I feel that it is a very opinionated aspect of the game for many. Now, the controls in this game are fine, they're not really bad, however there's no options to change the controls besides switching B and X. I've become very accustomed to the control scheme, but I have had some issues with controls, like trying to use my equipped ability, but accidentally holding the button down a nanosecond too long and pulling up the menu to change the abilities instead.
Get good. Shut the...
Now, having occasional issues is nothing, but I do wish there was some way to button map in the game, and the fact there's no way to mess around with controls is a downside. Now, you guys may also not be experiencing many problems with controls, but it is a clear downside for the game either way. On the topic of controls, it's worth mentioning how incredibly annoying it is trying to use the Sage abilities. It is incredibly easy to accidentally activate one when you're just trying to pick up items, and the fact that it's not something you can use from the ability wheel is disappointing and overlooked by the developers, because there's just the useless ability to pull out the map from the ability wheel when there's already a designated button for it. Now, shrines are absolutely amazing in this game, and a lot better than in Breath of the Wild, but the shrine quests are very disappointing. In the previous game, there were some shrine quests that gave slightly vague hints on how to get a shrine by doing something, and it was great. In this game, there are less shrine quests, and most of them are getting a green crystal to the shrine that it points to. Now, these would be great if they weren't easy, obvious, and most importantly, disappointing. Wow, I just bring this crystal to the shrine, let's see what the shrine looks like. Oh. You see, these quests are great, but they're not that difficult and there's not anything you have to really figure out, so when I get inside the shrine and there's not a bonus puzzle, it's quite disappointing. There are also some blessing shrines that you can just find in caves, but usually there's a boss fight or enemies in the cave. However, you can just get to the shrine without having to fight any enemies, and it's like, what? Why is it a blessing? I didn't do a quest, I didn't see anything. Oh, there was a talus in the cave. Shrines are overall really great in this game, but the few shrine quests are very underwhelming to me. Now, the amazing, super fantastic, ultra epic aspects of Tears of the Kingdom.
Let's go!
Greg, you got some problems.
At least I don't work for a corrupt soap company. This game is fire.
I don't know what to do about him. Now, the combat in this game is the same as Breath of the Wild's. It's still the simple, intuitive combat of Breath of the Wild, but with some new ways to fight. With puff shrooms, 8-fold blades, and a stealth outfit, stealth combat is much better than in the previous game. If an enemy catches you, you can disappear in the cloud and take them out. And if there's a cluster of enemies, distracting them has become much easier. With Muddle Buds, you can also turn enemies against each other, and you can use this for many instances. With Dazzle Fruits, dealing with a group of enemies has become a lot easier when they're stunned and you're about to do a charge attack. With the Fuse ability, you are no longer limited with your weapons. With there being a lot of weapons with their own unique effects, Fuse is a great way to take advantage of the effects. In the previous game, if there was a weapon with some unique aspect, you couldn't upgrade it or anything, so if there was a weapon that did way more damage, it didn't really make sense to use the one with the cool aspect, because it sucked. In Tears of the Kingdom, there are way more weapon effects, and if you like the effect of one weapon better than the other, you can make it do a lot of damage by just fusing a good monster horn to it. And that's how it is with all the weapons in the game. And you can give special elemental powers to any weapons with a fusible material that has an elemental power. Also, there are a bunch of cool new enemies to fight, with some of them being fun to fight without even utilizing some of the base sword combat. But there's enemies that do utilize it as well. And the new enemies also make the world feel more full. After stating pretty much all the new stuff you can do with the weapons in combat, it's clear that the combat is much better than it was in Breath of the Wild, because now you just have so many more options. The exploration has improved so much from the last game. The map size has more than doubled in this game with the addition of the depths, a whole world underground Hyrule, and Sky Islands. However, Sky Islands aren't really there for exploration. There is also more to explore in the base Hyrule map with the addition of caves and wells, which give you fantastic reason to re-explore this map you are already familiar with. There's just a lot more to explore and more reason to explore.
You know you can explore in real life? On the Earth?
Now when you see fuller world, I don't mean bigger world because that's already been established. In the last game, there was so much to explore and lots of cool things to do, but it also felt really empty in a lot of instances, with the only distraction being a Korok. In this game, you do indeed still have more Koroks, but they are a lot more fun, and there's just so much more to do. More mini-games, lots of small and big side quests, caves with enemies, resources, or both, and sometimes shrines. Sky Islands with their own cool activities, and to top it all off, way more monster camps, with the addition of some big monster fortresses. There's just a lot more things to do, and they're all spread around the map, so there's a lot less emptiness and a lot more stuff. The side quests have drastically improved from the last game with the 80% give me X number of X resource and 20% random whatever awesome side quests. You still have some side quests with that classic I need X number of X resource, but there's a lot of side quests that vary a lot in what you do. They are a lot more fun, you usually get cooler rewards, and there are some really big side quests called side adventures to make it even more awesome. It would take a while to go into full detail on just how great the side quests are and how much they've improved, so I'll just leave it at that. So, after all that, Tears of the Kingdom is a fantastic game and my favorite game of all time. However, it's far from perfect, and I can understand how it might not be some people's thing, but looking at it objectively, Tears of the Kingdom is definitely one of the greatest games of all time, especially when compared to other games like it. So now that we've made it through what makes Tears of the Kingdom such a great game, you probably weren't asking and don't care what is my favorite addition to the game? The caves! You see, I thought it was something we should have had in Breath of the Wild, so when I played Elden Ring and went through some caves in that game, I was pretty disappointed in Breath of the Wild. But Tears of the Kingdom completely made up for it.
Also, the Sky Islands are overrated. You have the Great Sky Islands to explore at the start of the game, but after that it's just a bunch of teeny Sky Islands with shrines on them.
Shut up, Greg. Oh, I also fixed Greg. It turns out all he needed was a little dose of caffeine.
I am an unstoppable force!
He drank 20 Mountain Dews.